And good morning, and it's time now for Common Sense Matters. And how are you, Betty, this morning?
I'm good. I didn't know I was going to be the star of the show. My star has not shown up. They're in traffic. I've gotten a call from them. JohnRayClemmons is going to be here. Clemmons is going to be here. He's a state representative from Nashville. He is very, very interested in government, and I feel like is an up-and-coming star in government. Yesterday I had a real interesting morning. I went to Franklin County High School, and of course, you know that's a love of mine, Franklin County High School. I spent 30 years of my life devoted to that institution. I went yesterday morning early, too early for me since I'm retired, and met with the young Democrats. And it was very, very interesting. They asked me questions like, what difference did it make in my life being a state representative's wife and having somebody in state politics? And of course, I explained to them that it made all the difference in the world. My husband represented 3 counties. It was 100 miles from one end of his district to the other. We had somewhere to go every night, and I was working full time at the time. Many, many days I left school at 3:15, drove to Nashville, did something that I had to do in Nashville, drove back that night and went to school the next day. I've gotten in at 3:30 in the morning but never missed school. My daughter told her class, she teaches in Tullahoma, she told her class, said, unless you had blood coming out of your eyes at my house, you went to school. She had 4 wisdom teeth removed one day, and she went to school the next day, and Hal Benson was my dentist, and she didn't have it done there. And Hal called me and said, sure you did not send that kid to school. Said, Betty, said, that's major surgery. So I did let her come home at noon that day.
That was awful nice of you. Yeah,
I thought so.
Well, it counted as being present that day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you got that in.
And I'm still on the state Democratic Executive Committee, and I have a meeting on Saturday in Nashville, and I know 2 items that we're going to be voting on as resolutions. One of them is whether or not we approve medical marijuana. And one of them will be a $15 minimum wage. So I cannot remember what the other one is. My brain's as old as I am, but it's another important thing that will affect your life and mine.
When you say vote on it, what does that mean? You voting on whether or not y'all want to pursue
to
that?
Endorse that.
Okay.
To have that as part of our platform. And, of course, you know, I'd be interested in how people here feel about medical marijuana. The minimum wage, the $15 minimum wage also, because I will be voting on that. I think that my counterpart has resigned, and my counterpart was Steve Roller. Steve Roller was the other representative from this 7-county area, and I think he has resigned. Steve has had a stroke. And his wife has passed away, and he's even quit law practice, I think. I'm real anxious for my people to get here.
I know you. I can tell. I'll let you know when they start another driveway.
Okay. What else you want me to talk about, Al?
Wow. Well, you know, I guess the Democratic Party is trying to put a resurgence. You know, guys have kind of laid back for a few years, and I think you guys are really trying to come on strong again and bring it back to life. Not only here in this county, but the state.
Well, that's so true. You know, the Republicans have a supermajority in the state legislature right now. And I certainly do not like some things that are happening to education because of that. So many rights have been taken away from teachers. I certainly do not approve of vouchers. Vouchers takes money away from public education. I am a public education advocate, of course, because I was in public education for 37 years, and then, you know, I worked with Christine down at the jail for 7 years, and then taught adult ed in that time, and altogether for 10 years. So I certainly have watched what they've done to public education the teachers now spend more time testing than teaching, it seems to me. Teaching is much harder now than it was when I did it. I taught at the right time. And I also want to remind you that this is being sponsored by the Franklin County Democratic Party, and the name of the program is Common Sense Matters, and we feel that way, that common sense does matter. When Democrats vote, we win, but Democrats have been complacent for so many years and stayed home, they think that they can do that now. And surely you realize that it can't happen anymore because of the things that are going on in Washington. You've got to get out and vote. We've got to emphasize the fact that Democrats have to come to the polls and vote.
Right, and of course, and you guys have got monthly meetings in which you're trying to get people into and get involved in and see what's going on in the party, right?
Yes, we met last Saturday, and I wish I knew when the next meeting was. I don't know. Maybe Bob Zimmerman or maybe somebody will call in and remind me when the next meeting is. I didn't know I was going to have to do this, or I would have come better prepared.
And I think your party is coming down the driveway, so you only got a moment or two more to fill.
Okay, that's good. That's very good, because John Ray is he's a very good speaker, and he's very into government. And I like to see young people. That's what we've got to do, is cultivate more young people. I had the students guess yesterday how old I was, and they were very complimentary.
Well, I think it's interesting that some of the questions these kids ask you, it sounds very intelligent.
Well, they were. They were interested to know, and I encouraged them to run for office, and encourage anybody to run for office. Everybody needs to do that one time. I did one time. I did not like running at all. Now, I can campaign for you all day, but I did not like asking people to vote for me. I felt like I was asking for welfare. It was the most uncomfortable feeling. But I've campaigned all my life, but not for me. I did not like it at all.
So what's the secret?
I don't know. I don't know why I felt that way. But it was not a comfortable feeling for me at all. And here is my guest, John Ray Clemmons. John Ray, I'm so glad to see you for more than just one reason.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be down here this morning.
So take over. We want you to address Democratic policies, and one thing that they ask that you do address is you address anything else that you want to, but the minimum wage was one thing they wanted you to talk about.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. It's great to be down here this morning. Drove down from Nashville. I'd be dropping my kids off at school right now if I weren't here. I got 3 boys, 8, 6, and 3 years old, so I got my hands full aside from politics. But, yeah, so, we're working on a lot of important issues up in Nashville. A lot of stuff's going on, focusing on education, jobs, and health care. Those are the big 3. Those are the big 3 on which the Democratic Party and the Democratic caucus in the House is focused, and year after year. And so, health care obviously is a big topic these days, as it should be.
A hot topic.
A lot of people are suffering across the state of Tennessee, and we haven't been exactly responsible on the issue at the state level. There's a lot of things at the federal level that need to be done, but we have a real responsibility at the state level to do our part. For instance, Commerce and Insurance, the Department of Commerce and Insurance has a duty to regulate insurance in the state of Tennessee. It's been my position that this department has breached its duty over the past few years. They've not held insurance companies' rates down and premiums down. Our commissioner's traveling around the country as the head of an organization, and she should be focused here at home because families down here in Franklin County are suffering as they are in Davidson County and all over the state. Regulation of the insurance industry is one of her chief tasks, and it's not being done adequately, in my opinion. And then, we've turned away over $3.5 billion. We could have expanded Medicaid and taken in $3.5 billion plus in tax money that we've already paid. We, as Tennessee taxpayers, have already paid that money into the federal government. and we could have received that back, and that could have been pumped into our local economies in the form of reimbursements from the federal government, and we could have had over about 300,000 Tennesseans getting access to care, but we chose not to expand Medicaid. In my opinion, that's fiscally irresponsible, and it's quite offensive to allow people across the state of Tennessee to continue to suffer when we could be providing them with access to care.
I think it's morally irresponsible also.
Well, I having been raised in the church, I would agree with that. I think it is morally irresponsible, turning your back on your brother and your sister and your neighbor when something like that is available to you as a state. I think you have a duty to look out for the best interest of everyone in your community. And like I said, there is no free money in government. But in this case, this is about as close as you're going to come to it. We paid that money, and we're not getting that money back. And I think of it as completely fiscally irresponsible.
All right, so is there maybe a plan or direction that we think we can go in to maybe help get this? Because I know a lot of people are trying to figure out how to fix health care.
Yeah, well, anybody that knows the answer 100% is lying to you. I can tell you that right now. You're talking about a complicated policy puzzle that there's a lot of moving pieces. There is no hiding from the fact it's a complicated issue, and everybody has their ideas about how to solve it or what's best. But at the very core, what we should be focusing on is the people and working back from that. Instead of trying to do what's best for insurance companies, trying to do what's best for hospitals, we need to focus on the patients, the people who need help and access to care. And then let's build a system around that. It needs to be fiscally responsible, it needs to be conservative, and it needs to be structured in a way where people get access to care, and not only care, but quality health care. Now, like I said, the federal government has a large role to play in this, and I feel like they've dropped the ball. Washington, D.C. is a complete mess, but the state has a role to play as well. I serve on the Health Committee and the Health Subcommittee in the Tennessee House, and we're looking at it constantly and evaluating ways that we can do our part.
All right. So what other issues you want to talk about, Betty?
Well, I'm very, very interested in this and the healthcare thing. We can't change our mind and go back and claim the money now. It's gone. Isn't that right, John Ray?
So that money is gone. There's still money remaining because obviously we're all still paying taxes. But the money that we have foregone has passed us by. It's been sent to other states that decided to expand Medicaid. So we have lost Tennessee tax dollars to the state of California, to Kentucky, to Indiana, and all these other states that could have been pumped in to our local economy. So just imagine what $3.5 billion would have done spread around the state of Tennessee. You look at all these rural hospitals that have closed across the state. Those hospitals, most of those hospitals would not have closed had that money been pumped into the state and people had access to care. And now we've got a gubernatorial candidate running around the state telling people that emergency rooms should be able to turn around people that come into their emergency rooms. Now, you want to talk about morally irresponsible. That's heartless. And when you get down to it, like I said, it's all about people, and you got to be able to do. Now, we want everybody to pay their part, but quite honestly, some people are in distressed situations, and there's distressed counties across the state where people are working as hard as they can, and yet they still need a helping hand. And that's why the minimum wage and a living wage is so important to a lot of workers across this state. It is also offensive to think about the fact that somebody's working 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, and still needs assistance when they're doing everything they can. We as Tennesseans, we pride ourselves on hard work. I was raised on a farm. I learned the value of hard work at an early age. And attended public schools, and you work hard and you do what's best for yourself. And we got families across the state of Tennessee that are doing just that. We got men and women working 1-2 jobs trying to support their family, and they're still hurting, and they still can't afford health care, and they still can't afford all the groceries they need to feed their children, or that car they need to get to work. And that's a real problem. So we have to focus on what we can do to make sure that our employers are paying people a living wage across the state of Tennessee.
Back to the health care thing, too. Now, understand that the health care question was not even allowed to be brought before the state legislature. Our state senator voted not to allow it to be brought up for a vote, and I want you to understand that also.
Yeah, that was an interesting situation. So I was first elected in 2014. I had gotten elected in a Democratic primary up in Nashville, and so my first experience in the state legislature was a special session that had been called by Governor Haslam on the Insure Tennessee plan. And so we get in there, we're all ready to go. We're looking at this, again, we're looking at prospect of receiving all these millions of dollars from the federal government that it's our money, and then to not even allow the issue or the bill to come to a committee for a vote. I serve on the health subcommittee. Like I said, it would have come there, or at some point the health committee, and we didn't even have a single hearing on that piece of legislation. And the reason for it was because Lieutenant Governor at the time, Ron Ramsey, crafted a special Senate committee, and they essentially killed the bill and didn't allow anybody to debate on it. It wasn't even the real health committee in the Senate. He concocted one specifically for the special session just to kill it. And then it goes back to all the points I made before. But if you want to, I got a lot of colleagues running around up there talking about fiscal responsibility and fiscal conservatism. Well, I'll tell you right now that turning away $3.6 billion of our money, there's nothing fiscally conservative or responsible about that.
Absolutely. I resent that so much because that's my money, and it went to Kentucky, California, like you say. I was very, very disappointed in my state senator.
Well, yeah, and you should be disappointed. Everyone should be disappointed, especially those who are walking around with no health insurance, because that your state senator probably played a key role in denying them access to quality care when they really need it. And these hospitals closing around, and families have to drive 3 counties over just to get access to an emergency room if their child, is injured or at school or something like that. That's a real problem. And people talk about it in terms of, it's just health care and whatever of these rhetoric that gets thrown around. But if you think about it from the standpoint of you're living in a rural town like I grew up in, and you're trying to improve your schools, you're trying to recruit jobs. Well, how are you going to recruit young teachers, right out of college to come teach in your public school system who's looking to start a family, and you have to tell her, there's not a hospital for 3 counties from here.
Right.
If your kid gets sick, you're in trouble. You're going to have to go over 3 counties. How are you going to recruit a teacher to your county if that's the case? How are you going to recruit a company that might provide jobs to your county if you don't have any health care provider?
How many hospitals have closed in the state of Tennessee because we did not take Medicare?
So 9, I believe, is the latest number that have closed since we failed to pass Insure Tennessee. 9 hospitals. And
I want somebody to represent me in Nashville and Washington both that's not there just to be reelected. I want them there to represent me. If insurance companies are furnishing campaign money for these people, they vote the way the insurance companies and the Koch brothers want them to vote, because if they don't, the Koch brothers will get them. I want them to represent me.
Well, I think it's fair to say that the people of Tennessee, a lot of folks across the state are frustrated. It showed in last year's presidential election, and people across the state in Franklin County is just like any other. People are frustrated. They feel like government's either left them behind, government is ignoring them. But what they need to realize is that they need to elect politicians that'll just shoot them straight. Right. That'll do what's best for them, not what's best for the politician's career. And, sometimes that involves making hard decisions.
Right.
Sometimes you have to vote for an improved act to get roads built. Sometimes you have to vote on issues that you may not want to vote on. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing what's best for your people and what's best for the state of Tennessee, then you're not representing anyone. And that's a real concern. And we have to get back. And I as a elected representative, I take full ownership of it. If I've done anything to make people, of Tennessee frustrated, then we got to fix it. We got to do better.
This is a call-in show, and it looks like maybe we might have a call.
You might.
Maybe we've touched a nerve, Betty. Wouldn't be the first time, would it?
All right.
Hello? Hello?
Yes. Representative Clemmons was talking about the 3.5, was it billion or million that we're
billion
not getting?
with a B.
With a B.
With a B. Well, President Trump is fixing to make a big announcement about opiate abuse, and I know that in Ohio and Pennsylvania, where they expanded Medicaid, so many people have gotten to go to rehab through having Medicaid. And when I think of all the Tennesseans addicted to opiates that could have been going to rehab all these years, it breaks my heart, And I don't know how he thinks he's going to help opiate abuse while getting rid of Obamacare and Medicaid expansion, which has helped so many people in those states that have expanded Medicaid. And that's really all I wanted to make. And if you have any thoughts on that, I'll listen offline.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for calling in. And she raises a lot of good, important topics. The opioid issue across the state of Tennessee has reached epidemic levels. We have a real problem, and it's like so many things. It's not a rural problem or an urban problem. It is a Tennessee problem.
Nor a Democratic problem or a Republican problem.
That's exactly right.
It is really a problem.
It is a serious problem that we really have to do a lot of heavy lifting on. And we're not the only state. This is a problem across the country, and that's evidenced by the fact that the president's going to make a statement on it. But, talk is cheap. It's what you do. The actions are what matters, and I've heard a lot of talk over the last 9 months, but I haven't seen much action. So, like I said, we have things we can be doing at the state level. One of the key issues on which I focus as a legislator, something about what I'm really passionate, is mental health parity and addiction equity. Now, as people might know, laws were passed by Paul Wellstone and Pete Domenici in the U.S. Senate and Congress in the early 2000s called the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act, and those laws were important because it treated mental health issues and addiction issues on an even keel and equally with physical health issues. The problem is the state of Tennessee hasn't been enforcing those federal laws. And so what you have is people having to reach their deduction before they get any coverage for mental health care or addiction care. So we have to do a better job, and I've been working on that and passed the first component of my Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act last year. Now, she raises an interesting point with regards to the states that have expanded Medicaid versus the ones that haven't. They have those resources to do a better job treating these individuals. One of the key things to point out with those states is look at the premium rate increases in the last 2 years in states that expanded Medicaid and the ones that haven't.
Oh, yeah.
You look last year alone, you look at Arkansas, our next-door neighbor. Now, they have the same political makeup we do. Republicans run everything over there just like here. But they expanded Medicaid. Their highest premium rate increase last year, I believe, was 11 or 12%. Ours was 62%. Now, what's that tell you? Now, how is that benefiting the people of Tennessee?
We have another caller. Hello, caller.
Yes, about the opioid problem with the state of Tennessee and all over the nation. The biggest thing is everybody's running around saying they're addicted. They're not addicted. It's not an addiction. It's a disease. I'm sorry, they're saying it's a disease. It's not a disease, it's a choice. It's a choice that these people decide to stick a needle in their arm. It's a choice that these people decide to go and abuse drugs. This is a choice. Change the people. Stop and definitely limit the opioid prescriptions massively. And, I don't think they had opioids 200 years ago. It was called toughness. But we've gotten to such a snowflake society that these are crutches for people now. There's no need in it. Bottom line, it's not a disease. It's the problem of the consumer that decides to take this stuff. They might be hurting after surgery. Take it for the first couple of days and then quit. But no, they don't want to quit. They like the way they feel. They like the way it makes them space out. So then they become addicted and they call it a disease. It's not a disease. It's a choice. They choose to do this. Do you want to stop the opioids, stop prescribing so much opioids, and make sure that you don't label this as a disease like everyone has for the last decade?
Well, thank you for the call. I think one thing is fair to say is that this addiction, or however you want to describe it, generally starts with a prescription.
It does.
So people go in there, and these things like OxyContin and things like that have, in my opinion, been overprescribed in the past, and they've kind of been used as a fix-all. In fact, the company that makes OxyContin marketed it as a fix-all from the very beginning. And that's just one example.
It is a huge thing with pharmaceuticals. I mean, as long as Big Pharma's making money, I mean, that's the way that it's been for a long time. We've got to cut that out. We've got to cut Big Pharma.
Absolutely true. I agree with you. And when we've passed a couple of laws here in recent years to keep a check on healthcare professionals and their prescriptions of these opiates. Because that's a real problem. Now, where it goes from there, yes, you're right. It's a personal problem, but it's a personal problem that affects everyone. It affects our schools, our families.
Is at a rapid pace in this county, especially. I don't know about other counties in the state, but I know for a fact that TennCare fraud here is absolutely at an all-time ridiculous high. And what I'm talking about is people's going and getting these prescriptions. They're not taking them. They're selling them. They're selling what TennCare is paying for. There's tons of people out there that are on disability that are absolutely not deserving of it.
Well, those
and they're taking these pills and they're selling these pills and they're getting our children hooked on them. And Franklin County High School is a perfect example. They've had a drug problem out there with prescription pills for years and years.
You need to report the people who are doing this so that we can investigate and catch those people and take them off the TennCare list.
The bad thing is there's officials that even know people who do it. So at the end of the day, you're not going to stop this till you get the corruptness out of the government.
Well, I know that. I know that. But if I knew somebody that was abusing TennCare, I certainly would turn them in.
Okay. Well, I'd say it'd be hard if you're well known in the county that everybody would probably know somebody.
Well, I don't.
It's hard to do
I really
anything
do
in
not.
this county and not know something.
I appreciate your call.
Else is going on.
Thanks for calling.
Well, I think an important point was made that, there's not a single one of us that hasn't been affected in some way by addiction, whether it be our own family members, or, a relative, a loved one, friend. But addiction is a real problem across the state of Tennessee in many different ways, whether it be alcohol, opiates, or otherwise, and it's something we really can't ignore.
I'm so afraid of taking pain pills. I think I have OxyContin that I just need to dispose of. I'm afraid to take it. And
a lot of people are afraid to take it. You got another phone caller.
Okay. Hello, caller.
Hi. I would just like to voice my opinion. I tend to disagree with the last caller. I know that, yes, it is a choice to some extent, but I do believe that given the right circumstances, it can become a disease, because once they start taking this drug, whatever it may be, the body becomes dependent on it. It tells the brain they have to have it. And I feel like that somewhere within the body or the brain, the gene has changed. And it's just like diabetes. No one had a choice in getting diabetes, but they got it. And no one had a disease or had a choice in becoming an alcoholic, but they were predisposed to that, and it became a disease. And I feel like long-term use of drugs can also change the genetic makeup of a person, therefore making it, the body dependent on it, becoming a disease. And I realize that the problem in this area is rampant, and I would just like to say that there are self-help groups out there to help the families, because the families hurt just as much as the addicted person. And as a member of Al-Anon, we meet Thursday night at the Winchester Methodist Church in the parlor room at 7 p.m., and we are a support group. We're not a fix-it group, but we give the families of the addicted person the support to help them through this trying time. And I am one that does believe that alcoholism is a disease, not a choice. Diabetes is a disease, not a choice. Heart failure is a disease, not a choice. And the person who is predisposed to using either alcohol or drugs can become a diseased person. So that's all I have to say. I just wanted to voice my opinion, and I thank you for bringing awareness to this problem.
Thank you so much for calling.
With all that you do, I thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for calling, and she's right. I mean, this is, like I said before, this is a problem, and I think a lot of science supports what she's saying, and regardless of how you want to characterize addiction, it's a problem, and just it's not just rampant in this county; it's rampant all over the state of Tennessee. Yes. Like I said, and most importantly, the impact that it has on families is
atrocious.
It's devastating.
It is.
If you've ever lived with somebody suffering from addiction, whether it be alcohol or anything else, it is a taxing issue, and I applaud her, for joining a support group, and the support groups are so vital.
Yes. To helping people cope, whether it's with the addiction itself or with a loved one or a friend who has an addiction, because it is a very taxing issue, and for those of us, if you've ever gone through it as a child or an adult, regardless, it has a lasting impact on your life. And I will say it had such a lasting impact on my life that I chose the path of public service, and that's why I work on that issue so often. Well, I haven't had that personally in my life, but I worked at the jail for 7 years. I have seen what it's done to families. And I've taught school for 37 years. I've seen what it does to families. So I'm very much in favor of addressing it. Do we have another caller? It's a serious, serious thing, and well, you raise an interesting point. You said you worked in the prison system or the jails. Uh-huh. It is a real problem. You go into any jail, and I've been, some people down here might know, I raise a lot of issues with privatized prisons, and I have a lot of problems with privatized prisons, but chief among them is their lack of rehabilitative and treatment programs in those prisons, because a lot of people there, you look at a major percentage that have mental health issues, and an overwhelming percentage has addiction issues. Absolutely. And a lot of times that's why they're there. They did something terrible, and a lot of time it was fueled by or in pursuit of drugs or alcohol.
Yeah. Got to have it, so they go break the law in order to get what they want, end up in jail.
Another caller.
All right.
Hello, caller.
I guess that's what I was going to talk about, the overcrowding of the jail, and what do they do with those people that have a problem. Just talk on that subject.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So,
thank you.
Interestingly, I guess coincidentally, I actually did a lot of research on this when I was in college and wrote a mini thesis kind of on the development of the penal system. So I'll just talk about it from that instance of, the three aims of a penal system and our prison system are punishment, deterrence, and rehabilitation. And the problem so often is rehabilitation is the first thing that gets thrown out the window. Right. That is especially the case when profit motive enters the equation with private prisons. If they can save money, they're going to save money to make more money, and rehabilitation programs cost money, medical care, mental health care costs money, they're going to throw it right out the window. and so they're just going to lock people up and keep them there. Well, with that mentality, our society is not going to progress because these folks are coming back out into society. If you want to stop recidivism, you want to slow down the rate of recidivism, and you actually want to have a productive penal system, rehabilitative programs must be on an equal keel, on an even playing field with the punishment and deterrence aspect of those prisons. And you would be shocked at the numbers and the percentages. I know you wouldn't be, Betty, but because you've seen it, of the percentage of inmates with mental health and substance abuse issues.
But is that not an interesting point? Jump in. Is that our local jails are turning into mental institutions? We're sending people to jail that have mental problems, and we're putting them into the jail and making the jail take care of them.
Well, that's right, and that's why we have a lot of counties, not just Nashville but others, have drug courts to focus on people.
We have a real strong drug court here. That's what I was about to say. When I worked at the jail, I said to every person I counseled with, if you are really serious about wanting to get out of your situation, get into drug court. Drug court will do it for you if you're serious about it, but you have to want to do it. It's a very strenuous program, but I've seen so many successes.
But it's two different things. Drug court and people with mental health things, they're two different issues and two different paths.
Well, that's right, and that's what I was going to say next. For instance, in Nashville, we have a mental health court, and we have special hearings, a special general sessions judge specifically to hear those types of cases, and in addition to the drug court. And the problem is every county doesn't have that. Every county doesn't have the resources to have that. And so what you have to do is prioritize it. And once you realize the fiscal impact, if you look at the dollar you could spend to have a mental health court or rehabilitation programs in your prison system or jail, the money you would save on the back end is tremendous. And you're talking tenfold. But the problem is sometimes you have politicians, elected leaders, or government officials that don't want to, go around and talk about putting a bunch of money into the court system because there is a mentality, and it's been around a long time, it's nothing new, of, lock them up and throw away the key. Well, you can't have that mentality. At some point you have to prioritize, realize it's an issue, and invest in it, because I'm telling you, you spend $1 today, you will save 10 down the road and make a real difference in that person's life, the family's life, their children's life, everything.
They become a productive citizen. They get a job. It's just a whole different world for everybody connected.
It is the success stories that I have seen from drug courts and mental health courts are just truly inspiring. And if you've ever really followed along with somebody who's gone through the experience, or you've seen the difference it's made in their life, you will be a convert on day one.
That's right. This girl that worked at Goody's said, Miss Fraley, it's just so good to be on the other side. She said, I love being on the other side. Said, I want to go to the jail and talk to people and tell them how wonderful it is.
We want everybody to be productive citizens and do their part and play their role in the community, and and at the end of the day, if somebody gets out and is playing a productive role in the community, they can be a mentor to someone else going through what they went through. They get a job, they're paying taxes, contributing to the community in a multitude of ways, joining the church or what have you. It really makes a difference.
It really does. And I think drug court points these people in the direction they need to go to if they need further help.
Well, they help them get jobs.
Yeah.
They help them with housing while they're in the program, and part of their job is to go find work. One of the biggest problems I think for people getting out of jail that wants to go straight is that they've dug themselves such a huge hole that they can't find the right kind of shovel to get out. Because one, they got to get a job. Two, they don't have means of transportation in small towns to get to point A and point B because they can't get their driver's license
for
back.
2 years. For 2 years.
Well, they can't afford. It's going to cost them thousands of dollars just to get their insurance, to get their license back, and then they got to get insurance. and so they got to find a job and these things, and so there's so many hurdles that they have to jump through that some of them just cannot get through every one of those hurdles, and then they end up back in trouble with their probation officer. Then they end up back in contempt of court, back in jail, and that seems to be the cycle that these people are in and have such a trouble getting out. Because you work down there, I worked down there. I spent 6 years working with these people, and that's their number one problem, is they cannot get themselves back into society in a work mode and able to get somewhere. And that's the biggest thing I ever hear from any of them is I can't pay my fines and get my driver's license back and all that stuff back and find a job, a decent job. Or I can find a job, but I can't get there consistently, because I don't have the support to get me there. Because a lot of them don't have families giving up on them. So those are a lot of big issues that are out there.
Well, the program I worked with was a reentry program. We do have a reentry program in this county.
Mm-hmm. We got a lot of programs. We got a lot of programs in this county.
Yeah.
I have to say that. We've done that here.
Well, that's important, and the county's to be commended for that, because it is all those things you listed. It can seem like an insurmountable hurdle for someone in that position. Having spoken with them, and you just look at the facts of it, and it doesn't take you long to figure out how tough it must be for somebody coming out, and especially you talk about their family may have written them off or anything else, in society in general, and also employers. You have that scarlet letter essentially on your resume that says felony conviction or what have you, or arrested, and some employers just won't employ you, and that's up to the individual employers, but it's just an additional challenge they have.
And I'm interested in seeing a felon erased. If a kid is 18 years old and commits a felon, it should not go with him the rest of his life. I'm very anxious to see something done about that.
Well, like I said, I grew up on a farm, and I think it's fair to say we've all done stupid things in our youth.
Of course we have. I grew up on a farm and didn't have time to get in trouble, but we still did crazy things.
Yeah, I don't think it amounted to felonies, but you do a lot of interesting things with fireworks and whatnot sometimes, and but the point is right. You make a mistake when you're young. And for that, you carry that around the rest of your life, it creates an additional hurdle for someone to be able to succeed as an individual and support their family.
You also mentioned, you talked about, in changing subject a bit, you've talked about the $15 minimum wage. Address a little bit on both sides of the table. I realize that people need to make more money, but what about small businesses? What about people that maybe struggle to meet the ends, and all of a sudden they're going to have to pay so much more for help? What is that going to do to the overall economy, here in the state of Tennessee?
Well, I don't think I threw out the term $15. I think that's the term that's generally kind of bandied about, or that's the amount that's usually referred to these days. But I think when you look at the minimum wage, you look over time, the purpose for that it was put into place, and you look at the fact that it hasn't increased in that amount of time, that just tells you right away that folks, there needs to be a bump in that minimum wage. Now, I'm a small business owner myself, so I completely understand exactly what that burden looks like and the challenges posed by it. But at some point, you got to figure out, are you going to invest in your employees and take a haircut on a little bit of the profit, or are you going to have employees that are coming in from working a second job who may be tired and not as productive at your place of employment? There's a lot of different factors that go into having a productive workplace and an effective employee. And I think it's vital to invest in your employees so that they can support their families. Because, like I said, people working 40 hours a week, not being able to support their family and still having to rely on somebody else for help, it's not the Tennessee way. It's not the American way.
No, it isn't.
We're raised to believe if you go up and you get a job, you contribute to society, and you work hard, that you'll be able to support your family, hopefully buy a house. But there's folks doing this that can't do any of that. They can't they can hardly afford groceries, much less buy a house or buy a car to get to work. So it's something we've really got to look at, but I am not ignorant to or blind to the impact that it could have on small businesses. But at some point, we have to decide what is more important, the people or the profit, and whether or not you want those folks coming to work. Like I said, tired. If somebody's working 8 hours a day for you and then going to work at Waffle House or wherever else, they're going to come into work the next morning. They're not going to be rested. They're not going to be, contributing as much as they could, and productivity levels may go down. So, again, there's a lot of factors that go into play.
And all of that money is going to go into circulation.
That's right.
It's not like giving the 1% a tax break. All of this money is going to go into circulation, the $15. And personally, I don't mind paying 15 cents more for a hamburger so that person can have a living wage. I really do not.
That's right.
Does that answer your question?
Oh, it answers my question, but I think what it's going to do is going to probably cause some small business people to maybe work fewer people, maybe to compensate, and then those people end up doing greater tasks while they're there, have greater responsibilities. Therefore, maybe they're going to make a little extra money on that end, but maybe have fewer people working for them. I don't know what the answer right off the bat is.
I think we have another caller.
Okay.
Hello, caller.
Yeah, I'm calling again. I have a question about the minimum wage. So, if we were to raise the minimum wage here in Franklin County, what would be the impact? How would our county be impacted? Like, I know that, for example, Walmart and McDonald's, rather than that extra, whatever, if it went from $7.50 to $10, that extra $3 an hour, instead of that going to Walmart headquarters, that would be staying in the county. What would be, like, the overall impact to an individual who gets that raise and then to the economy in general? And I'd love to hear your answer offline.
Well, I mean, let's say you go to $15 an hour, you're almost doubling somebody's income, and they're going to invest that money back into the community. Probably going to lead to more tax revenue for the county, probably going to lead to better schools, probably going to lead to better resources and roads for the county, and give an overall boost to the county as a whole to where there'll be more jobs and more. So if to raise your point, if a small business owner wants to cut back staff to be able to compensate that, then theoretically more jobs would be created in the long run. There's more employers. Like Governor Haslett was just running around the state the other day talking about this is the lowest unemployment rate in the state's history ever, or some superlative like that. So, if there was ever a time to raise the minimum wage, I think this would be the time.
Okay. What else?
Well, let's talk about one of my favorite issues is the governor's attempt to privatize our state parks. Y'all mind talking about that?
Not at all.
Because that's an important issue, and I'll tell you right now, we've used this term a lot this morning, but offended I was, as were many other Tennesseans. There's nothing, I think, much more near and dear to our hearts than our state park system across the state of Tennessee, and we have a great state park system and a lot of dedicated employees who make our state parks great. I don't know about y'all, but I had every family reunion growing up at a state park. Mine was Cedars of Lebanon State Park, and that's where that's the only place we could go swimming that wasn't the creek or anything else like that.
Families always have theirs. It's Tim Ford State Park.
That's right. And so, I was really upset when Governor Haslam, behind closed doors, mind you, started working on a scheme that I call it, to privatize our state park system. Essentially what they were wanting to do is they essentially hoodwinked the state legislature into appropriating a lot of money for state parks like Fall Creek Falls and others, with the intent to invest all this taxpayer money into these parks
and sell them,
and then hand over the keys. Not even sell them, just hand over the keys once they were fixed up. And then, you got a private company going to come in, cut staff, cut wages, cut benefits, and then we'd have, some corporate state park with a big logo on it or something like that possibly down the road. And I wasn't going to have it, and several of my colleagues weren't going to have it. And this is another nonpartisan issue, Tennessee issue. And, so what I did is I got Senator Lee Harris from Memphis. He and I decided to go around and tour the state. We held town halls at Fall Creek Falls and Montgomery Bell State Park, and just ask people. You know, we sent out postcards, said, come up here if you're interested in talking about outsourcing state parks, and let us hear what you think about it. Because rather than just take a position on it, and I was against it, but if I was going to be against it, I wanted to talk to people and make sure that what I thought was what everybody else thought.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do our research and make sure that the employees were, how they felt about it. So I tell you, we had standing room only public town hall meetings at these parks, and people were outraged. And so that just reinforced what our gut told us, that people find, these parks valuable to not only themselves and their family, but for their jobs and the local economies. Because, my goodness, these state parks, they make such a difference in the local economies. Most of them are in rural areas, and the jobs are few and far between in some of these areas, and they provide great jobs. And mom and pop businesses come up and pop up all around those park entrances and even within, and they're just so valuable to the community. So we really fought back hard. And on one side of it, we figured out, and thank goodness for the press, because the press had done some FOIA requests and figured out what was going on behind closed doors. And all this was going on behind closed doors. We didn't learn about it until about the summer of 2015, and we come to find out they'd been working on it since 2012, 2013 in the Department of Environment and Conservation to privatize our state parks. So it was going on behind closed doors, and then, we started pushing back on it and what it meant for people, and fortunately, the governor threw up his arms, I guess it was this past July or August, and said he's going to walk away from that scheme to privatize our state parks. So I consider that a tremendous victory for the people of Tennessee.
I do too. But, of course, some of our prisons, I got a call about that the other day about the privatized.
Oh, goodness.
Just how they're treating the prisoners, and they get calls just all the time about how just treating them terribly. Inhuman.
If I carried in, I've spoken out. I'm a lawyer on my day job, and I've had a battle or two with privatized prisons then, and so I learned, I'd like to say I learned too much during the course of discovery in those lawsuits before I ever got elected office. And so now that I'm in elected office, it's still an issue. It's still, and it's something I actually have an opportunity to do something about as an elected official. And so I've spoken up about privatized prisons once or twice, and once I did that, I think everybody kind of thought, oh, well, let's send our mail to him, which is fantastic. But if I had brought in all the letters I've received from prisoners and their families, I wouldn't be able to see you, Betty. It is, the stories coming out are just devastating. And again, it's this mentality of lock them up, throw away the key. And then with prisons, private prisons, the whole profit motive. Once profit enters the equation, everything else goes out the window.
That's just like school vouchers to me.
School vouchers are similar, but in this case, with respect to private prisons, rehabilitation goes straight out the window, and they get paid a per diem for every day that somebody's in a bed in there. And some of these contracts they have with local governments even guarantee them a baseline rate of prisoners. So even if that prison wasn't full, they're still getting paid X percent. And then anything over that, of course, they make money the more prisoners they have. So they have every incentive to write people up. They have every incentive not to give them rehabilitation or addiction treatment because they know they're going to act out, and they get to write them up and add bad time to the sentence, make more money on a per diem.
Right.
It's a vicious cycle, and it's one that we really need to look at. And what's interesting is if you look at the state law, the Private Prison Corporation Act under state law allows for one private prison to operate under the state of Tennessee. Only one. So what did they do? They went and decided to start contracting with local governments and counties. So you got, let's take Trousdale County, for instance. The big CCA facility up in Trousdale County, which is having a lot of problems, is contracted with Trousdale County. Well, they did that to skirt state law's restriction on one private prison. I think that's in direct violation of the law. I think it violates the entire spirit of the limitation of the law, and so we'll be looking at that and addressing that in the near future.
This is about over, I believe. I want to remind you that it's been sponsored by the Democratic Party of Franklin County, and the name of the program is Common Sense Matters. And if we haven't heard a lot of common sense things this morning, I don't believe there will be any common sense things. Thank you, John. Is it over? Is it time for
anything you want to say before you leave? You made a long trip down.
Well, I'm just honored to be down here. It's not my first trip down here, and I think my first trip down here I was on a high school football bus playing the Rebels down here. I think once upon a time, that was a while back when I was a bit more fit of a man, but it's great to be back down here. I love being down here and seeing my friends and just stopping by and speaking with folks and learning what's going on outside of Nashville, because so often there can be a bubble around Nashville, and it's important for all of us, regardless of who we have the honor of representing, to hear from all Tennesseans about what matters. And quite honestly, I get the best ideas for legislation by traveling the state of Tennessee and just talking to people, whether they be Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. Good ideas are good ideas, and there's no pride of ownership or authorship with good ideas, and I certainly don't always have the best ideas, and I've been proven wrong many times. But I will just say this. For the people out there listening who are tired of government ignoring them, or they feel frustrated, I just want them to know that I feel them. I know that a lot of my colleagues feel them, and we hear them. And I just want to encourage you to start electing people, if you're not already, who'll just shoot you straight, who'll just talk to you about issues, and they're not going to sell you a load of goods. They're just going to shoot you straight, tell it like it is, and do what's best for your family. A lot of people these days are voting in local elections on national issues. You need to vote in local elections on local issues, in state elections on state issues, because what's happening in Washington is not necessarily what you think or however you feel about what's happening in Washington is not necessarily what's going to make the best or biggest impact on you locally. So when you vote in state elections or local elections, vote for that person who's going to shoot you straight, who's not going to ignore you, and who is going to do what's best for you and your family. And I think if every Tennessean did that, this state would look a lot different, and we would be a lot better off.
I agree.
Good point. Betty, great show.
Thank you. I'm proud they found their way.